and 10th grade channel. I'm Aishwarya, and in our class today, as a part of our Jeet Ka Josh series, we are going to be learning about agriculture, and we will look at this whole chapter in one shot, where we'll discuss the important concepts, what are the most likely questions that we are going to get, and how we can go about learning, preparing our notes from this chapter. So today's class is going to be for about 1.5 hours. I'll try to wind it up by 5:30, or max to max this can go up to 2 hours, right? Because it's part of our Jeet Ka Josh series. So I hope that my audio, my video and my screen and what I'm writing on my screen is visible to all of you. Yes, so I can see that a lot of you are here already. There's Mantesha, Benjamin. Hello Benjamin. I can see Crazy Ishan, Krishna, Riya, Vanshika, Tanish, Lakshit. I can see that a lot of you are here already. Ella is here. Hello. Hello. Yes. Are we good to go? Is everything good to go? I hope you're not facing any technical difficulties. Yes, thank you so much, Riya. That's very sweet of you. I am doing great. I'm very excited. Now, of course, we were supposed to have this class last Friday, but due to some unavoidable reasons, we had to reschedule this, right? So I'm really sorry, first and foremost, that we couldn't do it when we had initially scheduled it to happen. Yes. Secondly, I hope all of you have your notebooks and pen ready with you. If nothing, right, I hope that all of you have your textbooks with you. Have your textbooks with you, have a pencil with you. Keep marking as I tell you what are all the important pointers. Yes? Are we good to go? Give me a quick Josh level check and we're getting started very quickly. I'll not take too much time with their introduction, right? So very quickly, are we good to go? How is the Josh level? Yes? I can see that a lot of you are here already, and I hope that all of you share this video with your friends. Tell them to come join this class as well, right? Josh looks very low today in class. Is the Josh low because you're like, ma'am, this chapter to bahut easy hai. Right? How many of you feel this way? Yes, start please. I'll definitely start. I'm just getting a quick Josh level check. Awesome. Okay. Hi Suraj. Hi Ayush. All right. I can see that the Josh is pretty high. So we'll get started, right? So now, as you know, this Jeet Ka Josh that is there is a part of one among many such sessions that we take on our channel, right? And in the upcoming days also, especially for class 10, we are going to have many classes, especially exam crackers. We will be doing PYQ sprints. We are going to be having critical questions. We're going to do crash courses. There's going to be so much that is going to be happening in our channel. So if you are very serious about your board exam preparation, you are very serious about, making sure you get 95+% in your board exam, then all you need to do is make sure that you like this video, you hit that subscribe button on our channel. Reason being, because our channel, we have a commitment, right? We have a commitment. We are giving you a promise that we will help you with your board exams. So please make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Yes? And now, of course, you know that we are in the hunt of, Byju's next quiz master that is there. Not just Byju's, India ka quiz master, right? So please make sure that you submit your entries because, of course, the quiz is happening on 30th of November. Now, a lot of you asked me, ma'am, will it be a physical quiz? Will I be physically present? Yes, you will be physically present. So please make sure that you register. You will get an opportunity to actually meet Saurabh sir and me, right? Personally, that too. So please make sure that you do register. Yes, okay, bye Lakshit. I hope you come back and you check this video out, right? All right. Hello, Aswari. Hello. Now, of course, very quickly, right? In this chapter, if you see, when we talk about agriculture as a chapter, we can divide this into 3 parts, okay? We can divide it into types of farming and cropping patterns. We can look at some of the major crops that are there, and we will look at agricultural reforms. And when we talk about map work from this particular chapter, we see that mainly it comes for identification. Now, of course, very quickly, everybody, I would like to confess something, because when I took water resources, and if those of you were part of my live session in water resources, I did say that you might not get map work from that chapter. I am very sorry. I made a mistake because I got confused with another chapter, right? At that point, I made a slight mistake there. Map work is definitely going to come from that chapter. That was my bad, right? I'm very sorry. So I will definitely do that bit once again, but I of course had to tell my students, right, that had happened. So I'm just letting you know we will be doing the map work for that part in greater detail, okay? Yes. Menti is still recovering, so very quickly what we will do is we will look at the chapter, right? We will just look at the chapter today, mark some of the important pointers that are there. So let's get started. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, right? I don't want to take too much of your time. So we're going to be talking about agriculture and types of farming. Now very quickly before I get started, this concept of agriculture, especially on a geography front, is not very new for all of you. No, we've all learned about this right from our lower grades, right? How many of you remember this? We would have learned about this in 8th grade, right? We learn about this in 8th grade, and then of course on another subject front, we also learn about agriculture, right? This is not a new word for all of you, yes? This is not very new. Talking about farming or crops, yes, these are all terms that we've heard. It's not that we need to go too much in detail, right? But these are not very new things that we have to get scared about, right? Yes, a lot of you are telling me, ma'am, yes, ma'am, it's not that new for me. So when we talk about agriculture, something that comes very synonymous with it is food, right? So we know when we talk about food sources or why food is necessary, we know that food is a fuel that drives our body, and all of us require food that is there. Now the food that we eat can be plant-based or it can be animal-based, right? And of course you know that for the large demand of people who are there in the world, we need to produce it at a large scale. So that is what we understand as agriculture. Very simple and easy. So what is agriculture? If you actually break the word down, agar means field and kolo means to cultivate, right? So that is what we mean by agriculture. So if you have to define agriculture, very good Aswari, I can see that you are giving me the answer that it is producing crops and rearing livestock. Or if I have to just add a little more to it, it is the science and practice of cultivating the soil or preparing the soil, producing the crops like you told me, and rearing livestock. Yes? So you can make a note of this down, put a star mark or write it down in pencil in your textbook. Yes? And we know that agriculture is a primary activity. So amongst the activities that we do, practice at a larger scale, when we look at economic activities, we know that agriculture is a primary activity where we produce something, right? So that is what we mean by it. So we are producing most of the food that we consume. Now, of course, to carry out agriculture, right? Now, India is mainly an agricultural country. That means that more than 60% of the population, they actually carry out agriculture. And to do agriculture, there are some inputs, right? It's not that food is just getting produced, right? You need certain things so that food can get produced. Now this can be in two ways. You have physical inputs, basically nothing but what are all the physical aspects of it. For example, you need seeds, you need rainfall, you need a land to do agriculture, you require appropriate amount of temperature, right? And sometimes to aid that process, we might also have to help, right? Sometimes we have to do some mechanical labor, or we may need some machines, or we might require some chemicals, right? So these are some cultural inputs that are there, right? So now understanding and keeping this in mind, let's move on to understanding more about types of farming, right? Yes. Now very quickly I have a question. How many of you get confused between agriculture and farming? Do you think both are different or do you think both are the same? What do you think? Ma'am, is capital human input? Capital could be in the form of money also, right? Money that you invest. Now that could be either in purchasing some fertilizer, capital could be in employing people, or capital could be in terms of buying some machinery. Yes? Yes, some of you are like, ma'am, I'm confused. Ma'am, both are same. Both are more or less the same actually. They are terminologies we tend to use. So it's like, what do you say? Agriculture is a broad umbrella term, right? Which is the science as well as the practice of cultivating soil, crops and rearing animals. But farming mainly that is there is the practice of cultivating crops that are there at a large scale, right? So that is something that you need to understand, okay? Alright, so now let's move on to types of farming. Now before I go into types of farming, I can see that a lot of conversation is happening in the chat, and as you know, our moderator is very strict today and will time you out if you spam, okay? So here I'm giving you all a warning who are there in the live chat that be careful because you can get timed out. And later please don't come and tell me, ma'am, moderator is timing me out. You should also not be spamming in the chat, okay? So stay focused in class. I will strictly quickly tell you this, you stay focused and make sure that you pay attention. Yes? Okay, no problem, Vanshika. I can see Rahul here, Arya, all of you are losing track here. So let's stay focused. So how do you differentiate between agriculture and farming? See, agriculture, like I told you, is the science and is the practice of doing what all? Of cultivating soil and of course growing crops and rearing animals, right? So this is what we mean by agriculture. It's like a science and a practice, a broad umbrella word that is there. But on the other hand, when we talk about farming, it mainly comes to practicing agriculture or utilizing farmlands, right? When you grow crops in farms, we say that is farming, right? Aswari, all the best for your SST exam for tomorrow. I hope you do really well, right? Yes. So now let's move on to understanding about the types of farming. Now, types of farming can be broadly of two types. Yes, so we have subsistence farming and commercial farming. So what do we mean by subsistence farming? Subsistence farming is a type of farming wherein farmers cultivate crops for their own needs. So if I have my land and I'm growing agriculture, so in my house, right outside my house, I have some land and I decide to grow some crops, right? So that is what I mean by subsistence farming, where I'm growing it for my self-consumption and I'm not really ready to sell it in the market, right? So mainly it is for self-consumption. So subsistence means the action of supporting oneself at a minimum level, okay? Always think about it. While on the other hand, commercial farming is when you grow crops at a large scale, right? So that large quantities of it are manufactured to do what? To sell it in the market. Very good, Navneet, for money, right? Yes, dealing with manure and you cannot say that is only agriculture. It is a part of agriculture, Divyansh, dealing with manure and fertilizer, right? Yes, okay. I will be telling you, the first important question is to understand this. They'll ask you to differentiate between subsistence farming and commercial farming. One possible question you can get, differentiate between the two. Right? So if you have to differentiate, this is how we would differentiate. Take a screenshot of this, right? So subsistence farming, as we know, is a small piece of land that is there. So very small plot of land where we grow crops for our own need, and normally the family members. So if I have my family, right, a few of my family members will be necessary or they will be involved in the farming practice, right? Now on the other hand, we see that normally it is small output and they use very primitive, simple tools that are there wherein we have handheld equipment, right? So mainly your traditional tools, I could say. So traditional tools like your plow, hoe, all those things, are normally used in subsistence farming. While on the other hand, right, commercial farming is when a large plot of land is used and the crops are grown for commercial scale. People are paid money so that they can carry out this farming and large output, right? And they use heavy machinery. So this is what we call as commercial farming. Now Nirmal has asked me a very important question. Ma'am, if farmer grows both for himself and the market, that is where we call intensive subsistence farming, right? So that is what we mean by it, right? That is what we understand as intensive subsistence farming, and we look more into that, Nirmal, okay? Yes. Ma'am, what is small output? That means that if I have one piece of land, okay, and I just sow 10, I need only maybe 1 kg rice for my house, right? 1 kg rice is enough for me. So I just grow how much? Very few plants. So if I grow that many, my output, what I'm going to get at the end of it is only that much. No, so it's very little. Yes? Okay. So subsistence is mainly done. Very good, Abhinav. It is done on a small budget, right? That means that not a lot of money gets invested, right? When compared, see, it's not like very little money means 10 rupees, 5 rupees. No. So when compared to your commercial farming, it is relatively less, right? Okay. Small pocket of land. So now in subsistence farming also, so I'd always suggest that you make a mind map for this chapter. It always comes easy. So when you talk about types of farming, you know that you have subsistence, and in subsistence you have two kinds. You have intensive and you have primitive, right? So this is what we mean by it. Okay. So now let's go on to understanding a little more about primitive subsistence farming. Yes? Ma'am, what is the difference between the two? I am going to explain that, okay? So I will take your questions, right? So I can see a lot of interesting questions are there. So can I do one thing? I will finish primitive subsistence farming and then can I take your questions, right? Give me 5 minutes. Let's understand primitive subsistence farming together. Then we'll do a doubt board kind of section where you will be able to ask me your doubts, right? Yes. Hello, Prashant. Hello. So now let's move on to understanding about primitive subsistence farming, right? Now when we talk about primitive subsistence farming, as the name suggests, it is a very primitive practice, right? So in this case, when we talk about a primitive practice, what we normally see is that in this kind of farming is also known as slash and burn agriculture, right? Or what we often know as jhumming, right? So in this we see that a small patch of land is, identified, and if there's a forest cover, the forest is cut down, right? And once the forest is cut down, we see that the trees are burnt. And the reason why they are burnt is because the ashes are also rich in nutrients. And then we see that once it is burnt out, the seeds are sown and they are allowed to grow, and of course the crops are harvested. Now we see that it's not that they use it one time. So what happens is that sometimes 2-3 times they are able to, grow the crop on the same piece of land. But eventually when the soil fertility goes down, they will abandon that land and move to the new piece of land, and they will do the same practice. So when they abandon that land, or the reason why they abandon it is so that the soil can naturally replenish its nutrients, right? Or it can naturally regain its fertility. Now when they do this, they use very primitive things also. They use plow, hoe, stakes, right? And they do not use any chemical pesticides or fertilizers, right? And we see that this of course depends on monsoon, natural fertility of soil and environmental conditions. Yes, Divyansh, this is mostly practiced by forest people or people who live closer to the forest regions, right? We also learnt about this idea when we looked at forest society and colonialism. Very good. So now of course some of the crops which are sown, and this is a question you can get, okay? Give some examples of crops which are grown using primitive subsistence farming. So what examples that are there? It mainly includes maize, cassava and yam, right? So we know that certain cereals are grown. Yes, but along with that, cassava and yam are examples. Write this down. You will definitely get this, okay? This is a very possible question that they might ask you. Now, some of the disadvantages that are there is that continuous cultivation can lead to loss of soil fertility. There is low land productivity, and of course you know that at a larger scale this is causing deforestation, right? And we know that this is something which is practiced in Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland, and it's also practiced in different parts of the world, right? So, ma'am, it is an old type, right? It is an old type of farming, Mariam, which is why we also call it as primitive subsistence farming, right? So that is something that you need to understand. Now moving on to intensive. So now we know what is primitive. Now we know some of the key pointers. While on the other hand, when we look at intensive subsistence farming, we see that these are usually practiced by farmers who own small piece of land, okay? That means if I am a farmer who practices intensive subsistence farming, I will have only small piece of land, okay? And in this small piece of land, I will maximize my output. That means that from this small piece of land, I want to get 10,000 kgs of rice. So earlier you remember when I was telling you, if I was just a subsistence farmer, if I just wanted to grow 1 kg rice, I will, grow little bit. But now in intensive practice, that means very, you put a lot of it to get maximum output. So small piece of land, high output. This is the key term here. Small piece of land, high output. And this is to feed a large population. Now, surprisingly, in India, we most often than not follow intensive subsistence farming, right? And here we see that large doses of chemical fertilizers and pesticides are used, and advanced irrigation techniques are there. And again, high production output is required. So, are we clear? Ma'am, how to remember, right? So, how to remember? Mainly make a table, right? So, make a table out of it. So easy way is write subsistence farming And now write the 3 pointers on subsistence farming, right? So it is a small piece of land, right, wherein agriculture is cultivated. Mainly minimal labor is there. Mainly only family members are using this, right? And of course, what else is there? We see that relatively less output when compared to your commercial farming. And we see that traditional tools are used. Okay, you can write 3 points like this. There are many more. You can write down your important ones, right? Okay. So now, of course, moving on, you have two kinds, right? You have primitive and you have intensive. Yes? Okay. Now, under primitive, can you all tell me, right? So, can you all tell me what are the important pointers you would write about primitive very quickly? Yes, I will explain this once again in Hindi. So first I will explain in English, then I will explain in Hindi. Okay, Aryan? Because I did see that a lot of you like Kanishka is asking me for Hindi. So I will do it once again in Hindi. But first we will do it in English. Yes? Very good. Right. So here we see that primitive tools are used. Okay, so we see primitive tools are used. What else? We use primitive tools. Then it is a type of slash and burning for farming. Okay, traditional implements. All right. What else? Slash and burn is a kind of primitive. Small patches of land. Okay. More than that, we're trying to differentiate between primitive and intensive, right? So what else? They are dependent on monsoon. No, they are dependent on monsoon for their irrigation. And we also see that they use no chemicals at all, right? Very good, serious arts, very good. No fertilizers or chemicals are used, and we see that they're dependent on monsoon. Normally, very good. Examples Ananya has given me. Examples are maize, yam, and cassava, that is there. And yes, relatively less output, right? So the output is less. Wonderful. Now, when you are comparing it with intensive, we see that more advanced tools are used, right? So in this case, we see that again primitive tools, but comparatively a little more relatively advanced tools are there. So again, I'm saying relatively advanced. I'm not saying they are fully advanced, right? And here we see that they are dependent on some irrigation practices. So we see that they require some irrigation, maybe in the form of canals, right? Here they use chemical pesticides. So chemical pesticides and fertilizers are used. Yes. And of course, we see that in a small piece of land, they require high output. So this is something that you need to understand. MP. Have I written MP on screen? Otherwise, it is with respect to. So MP with respect to what are you asking me, Kamna? Okay. And this puts more pressure on land, right? This puts more pressure. So very quickly, you can go ahead and take a screenshot, right? Do they use HYV seeds? That's a very interesting question. Most likely than not, they are expected to use that, right? Okay. Now for those of you who are telling me in Hindi, because later on you will tell me, ma'am, आपने तो सिर्फ English में पढ़ाया, हिंदी में नहीं पढ़ाया. It's very simple. Subsistence farming में एक छोटे piece of land में हम farming करते हैं. Normally जो subsistence farming होता है वो एक individual की purpose के लिए वो करते हैं. तो अगर मेरा family है तो एक plot of land है तो मैं और मेरा family वहाँ पे हम farming करते हैं. वो subsistence farming होता है. ठीक है? On the other hand, subsistence farming में दो तरीके हैं, primitive और intensive. Primitive में primitive tools use करते हैं, monsoon के we are dependent on the monsoon और chemicals का ज़्यादा usage नहीं होता है. और slash and burn एक तरीका होता है primitive subsistence farming करने के लिए. On the other hand, intensive subsistence farming में relatively advanced tools होते हैं, right? And we see that ये छोटे piece of land में ज़्यादा population के लिए farming करते हैं, right? और large doses of fertilizers, advanced irrigation technique use करके वो intensive subsistence farming करते हैं, right? And we see that output जो at the end of the day जो भी agricultural crops मिलता है वो high output होनी चाहिए. That means large amounts of it should be there, right? So are we clear so far? Lot of you are like, अरे मैम आप हिंदी में नहीं पढ़ा रहे हो, समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. अभी सब समझ आया, right? Are we clear? See, I'm taking it slow so that you all understand this, right? I am trying with Hindi. I am still trying. Now, one among the disadvantages, right? Examples of crops, again, your normal rice, wheat, they are all what we practice most often than not are examples of intensive subsistence farming, okay? These are some examples that are there. Now moving on, one thing about intensive subsistence farming, right? One thing you need to know, right? One thing you need to understand is that normally with this, there is an idea of right of inheritance, okay? So what do we mean by right of inheritance? What do we mean by this? So imagine there is one farmer, right? And he owns this, oops. So we see that there is this farmer. Let me move this away. And we see that he owns this one piece of land, right? Now what happens is that he has two sons, okay? He has two sons and he has divided this land amongst both of his sons, right? Now each of these sons have two sons each. That means now they have further divided the land, right? So what was initially one big piece of land has now gotten divided by 4 over generation. And this is because from one generation to another, land is inherited from father to son, right? So that is what we understand by it. So this right of inheritance, what happened was that created a division of land, right? So now there was division of land among successive generation. Now we say, this is creating high pressure on the land. This is the reason behind it. Why was there enormous pressure on a small plot of land? Simply because over time they kept dividing the land, and in that chotu piece of land they wanted to get high output. So that is not possible, right? Which is why we see that there are some disadvantages when it comes to intensive subsistence farming, okay? While on the other hand, when we talk about commercial farming, so now we have looked at subsistence farming, it is all over. When we look at commercial farming, we see that there is a large piece of land, very heavy machinery used, wherein we see that normally we see that, your modern tools. So we see that modern tools are implemented here, and here we see HYVs. HYVs are implemented in commercial farming. I'm sorry, not in intensive. They are implemented in commercial farming, right? Chemicals, fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides, they are all implemented here for high productivity. And again, we see the degree of commercialization. So somebody was asking me, ma'am, ye degree of commercialization kya hota hai? So basically, whenever we talk about commercializing something, right, that is again for the broader aspect, right? It means that for mass consumption, I'm making it commercial so that it's available to many. We see that commercialization of this differs from person to person or from region to region. Because if you see in Haryana and Punjab, rice is a commercial crop, while in some regions like Odisha, it is a subsistence crop. So if I have to scale it up, basically, right? If I'm able to scale it up from subsistence to commercial, it depends on multiple factors, right? It depends on the region. Am I getting everything that I need? Am I getting my tools? Am I getting my manure? Am I getting my fertilizer? Very good. It depends on the climatic conditions, right? So this is what you need to understand. So we are clear with subsistence farming and we are clear with commercial farming. If you all get short notes on this, will you be able to answer? Are we clear? See, in each of it, you have four pointers to write. Easily, if a short note comes, you will be able to write it, right? Are we clear? Yes? Give me a quick thumbs up in the chat. Because I understand, see, again for all of you who keep asking me, ma'am, aap Hindi mein karo, Hindi mein karo. I do want you to learn in Hindi. I want to teach you in Hindi. But at the end of the day, you have to write it in English, no? So I'll try to make it easy for you in English. In English, if you're still not able to understand, you tell me, ma'am, English में भी समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. आप एक और बार हिंदी में बोल दो. तो मैं definitely आपको हिंदी में बताऊंगी, ठीक है? But primarily our focus is going to be on English. Yes? Very good. So now what does HYV mean? That means it is high yielding varieties, right? So that is what we mean by it, okay? Very good. They are high yielding varieties that are there, okay? Now, of course, we will move on to understanding a type of commercial farming. So now we know that commercial farming is what is there is again on a broader front, right? We are commercializing it. So one such example is of plantation. Now, again, I have a doubt here. Ma'am, plantation क्या है और ये crop क्या है? Are they the same or are they different, right? Yes. How many of you have this doubt? Ma'am, ये दोनों क्या है? Yes, and for those of you who are telling me about the chat, you do know, right? Our moderator is here, which is why I told you, do not, you know, what do you say? Spam in the chat because you need to stay focused in the class. Yes, ma'am, me, I'm getting confused. Yes, Sanika says, but Ashish is like, no, ma'am, I know, right? I know what's happening. Yes. So now, of course, very good. Plantation are mainly, right? So plantation that is there is mainly grown for commercial use. No? Now you'll again tell me, ma'am, we just learned about degree of commercialization. Yes, I will explain that once again. Now, degree of commercialization. Now, what is a commercial crop? A commercial crop is one which you can grow at a large scale, right? At a huge scale that is there in a large plot of land, right? That is what we mean by commercialization. Yes, and now how will you commercialize it? You will use heavy machinery, you will get, you know, pesticide, insecticide, you will get all the fancy things that are there, and you will be able to, you know, grow it at a large scale. So that is what we mean by commercialization. Now, degree of commercialization varies. That means that in some places like Haryana and Punjab, I am able to attain this, and certain crops like rice can be grown. That means rice is a commercial crop there, right? So that is what we understand by it. But in places like, you know, Odisha, we see that maybe it was not able to scale up with respect to the climatic conditions or various other reasons, which is why it's still a subsistence crop, right? So that is what we mean by degree of commercialization. How much am I able to scale up, right? Am I able to do hundreds and thousands of kgs of rice, or am I still limited to doing 10,000 kgs or 5,000 kgs? So that difference is what we call as degree of commercialization. Now, if I am able to commercialize it, right, we normally see that plantation crops that are there are the commercial crops or the cash crops. So they bring us the revenue or the money, right? So we see that in such cases like beverage crops like your tea and coffee, we see that cultivation of a single crop happens on large estates of land. So I'm sure all of you would have seen, you would have all heard about tea estates, right? How many of you have heard about tea estates? Yes? Very good, Kanishka, very good. Yes. How many of you have heard about tea estates? How many of you remember this? I'm sure all of you would have, remembered this, no? Yes, very good, very good. You're like, Mom, I remember. Tea estates are very common because again on large area of land, tea is being grown, right? And we see that it covers large areas of land, right? And again, lot of intensive inputs are there. That means that here we see that lot of money is invested. We see that a lot of people are required to maintain it, right? And we see that tea, coffee, rubber, coconut are all examples of plantations, right? So here again, when you say capital investment intensive, that means a lot of money is invested, right? So you need to understand this, okay? All right. Now that we have learnt about this, let's move on to understanding cropping patterns in India. Now, how many cropping patterns are there? We have 3 cropping seasons in India because you know that India being the country it is, different parts experience different climatic conditions. And based on that, we have 3 kinds of crops. So can you tell me in the chat how many types of crops are there? Yes, how many types of crops are there based on cropping patterns? Very good, very good. Yes, we have 3, right? And can you tell me what are the 3? Yes? Are there any snags in commercial farming? Are you saying some disadvantages, right? Very good. Kharif crop, Rabi crop, and yes, Zaid crop. Now, this is a very easy one. This is all again something that we have learnt about, right? Not mixed cropping pattern, right? That is different. That's based on how you practice the cropping. But here it is based on your cropping seasons. If it is based on your cropping seasons, then you have Kharif, Rabi and Zaid. Now what are kharif crops? Kharif crops are also known, or kharif comes from the Arabic word which means autumn, right? So here we see that normally it's from June to October. So we see that it is sown in the monsoon season, right? So it is sown in monsoon season and it is harvested in the autumn season that is there, normally harvested during September October time, right? Now we also see here that they are most often than not called as monsoon crops and they require a lot of water, right? While on the other hand, when we talk about Rabi crops, we see that in Rabi crops, we see that it is normally between October to May, right? Which means that they are called as winter crops because they are sown between October to November and they are harvested sometime around, April, May time, right? So that is why we call them as Rabi crops. And relatively, they require less water, yes? While on the other hand, we see that these are some examples. Now, Zaid crops are those which come in between, right? So they come between that season of Rabi and Kharif, right? So it's the shortest cropping season and they require warm and dry weather. Yes? Very simple and easy. Okay? Now you need to remember examples. Very important. So I have an easy way of remembering this. You have RMC here and here you have PW. Here you have PWM. And here you have here it is BMW, sorry. Here it is BMW and here it is PWC, okay? Remember these three terminologies. RMC for crop, that means Kharif, that means rice, maize, cotton, right? BMW for Rabi. BMW, you can remember it's a type of car, right? BMW is your barley, maize and wheat, right? Then, barley, mustard and wheat, sorry. PWC is pumpkin, watermelon and cucumber. Okay. Ma'am, why do Kharif crops require more amount of water while Rabi needs less? See, again, why we categorize them as Kharif is because they require more water to grow. Now, why do they require more water? That could be trickling down to a much broader way with respect to their growing. So, their growth need and of course how they absorb nutrient and how much nutrition they require, right? So this is something that they need to understand. So for growth and maturation, right? For growth and maturation of the plant, they would require more or less amount of water. Now that is why it again differs, right? Now even in our eating habits, if you see, we all say that we require balanced diet. But then again, from individual to individual, based on our, individual needs, sometimes I might need more amount of protein, right? But maybe when compared to somebody else who might require more amount of vitamins. Kind of like that. Ma'am, which requires less, Rabi or Zaid? So that is again, it differs from crop to crop again, I would say, but comparatively maybe Zaid crop because they are found growing in the summer season, right? So compared to Rabi, it could be Zaid crops which would require relatively less amounts. Yes? So remember this, RMC, rice, maize, cotton, BMW, barley, mustard, wheat, and PWC, pumpkin, watermelon, and cucumber. And take a screenshot about this, okay? So are we clear with the first part? Are we clear? Any doubts? Ma'am, in 9th only we learned about it. You've been learning actually from 8th standard about all of this. Yes, okay. We are clear. We are good to go. Once more, okay, we have 3 cropping seasons in India because India being the wonderful country that it is, different regions experience different climatic conditions, right? So we see that if there are some crops which require more amount of water and they are normally sown during monsoon season and they are harvested by autumn season. So between June to October, we call them as Kharif crops. So your rice is a very common example. While some are sown in October season and harvested during November, we call them as winter crops or we call them as Rabi crops. ओके हिंदी में सो कैरिफ क्रॉप्स है, राबी क्रॉप्स है, ठीक है? अभी सो फार हम क्लियर है. ज़ैद क्रॉप्स जो होता है जो वो कैरिफ और राबी सीजन्स के बिटवीन ग्रो करता है, जो समर सीजन में ग्रो करता है, राइट? उनको रिलेटिवली वार्म वेदर का नीड है और रिलेटिवली लेस अमाउंट ऑफ वाटर चाहिए. सो पम्पकिन, वाटरमेलन, दे आर ऑल सम एग्जांपल्स, राइट? So we are clear with this, and here's a quick question for all of you. Which of the following best describes intensive subsistence farming? Very, very important. Which would define it the best? A single crop is grown on a large area. Forests are removed and trees are burned to make the area available. Farmer cultivates a small plot of land using simple tools and more labor. What is the correct answer? Which describes the best, right? Which describes intensive. Single crop grown on a large area. We'll have a poll for this. Shall we have a poll? Jasima, can we have ABC? Yes. See, Arya, I told you all of you need to be careful because our moderator is very, closely monitoring the chat. This is a tricky one. I can see a lot of mixed answers that I'm getting in the chat. I'm seeing A, I am seeing C, I am able to find B, which is why we're going to have a poll, right? So those of you who have paid attention in class will get this answer. I'm 100% sure. Poll is on your screen. You can answer very quickly, everybody. Okay, I can see 20 votes in. What about the others, everyone? Very quickly. Okay, let's see how many of you have got the answer to this. Okay, so let's close the poll, Decima. Let's see what the results have come. Okay, ma'am, I'm not able to vote. I think the poll was closed, right? Okay, and I can see most of you have voted for option A. See, we are talking about intensive subsistence farming. So if it is subsistence, it is on a small piece of land. If I'm saying single crop grown on a large piece of land, I am talking about commercial farming, and mainly I'm talking about plantation, right? So how can A be the answer? How many of you got confused with this? This is incorrect, right? If it is large area, understand we are talking about commercial farming, right? While on the other hand, when we talk about forest being removed and of course trees are being burned to make the area, we see that this right here is primitive, right? So this is primitive subsistence farming, which is why the correct answer is option C. Are we clear now? Are we clear for those of you who voted for A and is now the incorrect answer, right? Are we clear? Yes, very good for those of you who have got it right. Yes, and for some of you who are asking me about some mega menti that is going to happen for biology, well, you are in store. It'll not, I don't know if it's going to be a menti, but you will have a session of full revision for biology for class 9. So just stay tuned, right? Okay. Ma'am, question I did not understand. Yes, ma'am, I did not. Could you please repeat? Okay. See, what are they asking you? They're saying what describes intensive subsistence farming the best, right? Now, we know that when we say subsistence, this means that it is in a small area, right? So, it means it's a small area of land. Now, option number A says a single crop is grown on a large area. Large area is immediately equal to commercial farming, right? Which is why this is wrong, okay? Now the second thing they're saying, forests are removed, trees are burned to make area available for farming. This is a type of subsistence farming, right? But this is primitive subsistence farming. Yes, it is primitive, which is why they are asking about intensive. And in intensive, a small plot of land is used wherein more labor is there, and we know that simple tools are used to, practice this, right? Which is why the correct answer is option C. Yes? So we are clear now, no? Are we clear with this? Because a lot of you see in your exam also, if you get questions like this, you will have to read through the question. And it's a very direct question as well. It's not very tough, right? Okay. Now moving on, before I move on as a matter of fact, right? Please understand that here at Byju's 9 and 10 channel especially, we have got you covered and we want you to understand all of this in greater detail, right? Which is why we've also shared a smart playlist for all of you which will help you out with the best sessions that we have on our channel for your board exam preparation. Yes? So I hope that all of you have registered in that link and you have gotten access, right? And please make sure that all of you subscribe to the channel. See, if you are understanding what we are doing this for you, no? We want you to do well in your board exams. And if you do well, that will help you out in your future, right? So that you need to understand very clearly, you hold the power to mold your future. And you need to take the right actionable steps for that. And how do you do that? You start by making your preparation stronger. And if you want to make your preparation stronger, then register to access the playlist, and please make sure that you like the video and you subscribe to the channel, right? So do not forget to do that, okay? All right. So I saw that some of you are like, ma'am, we just got back from school and maybe we missed out the first part. Don't worry about it. If you've missed the first part of it, you can always come back and watch it, okay? So don't ever worry about it. All the videos are accessible for you. You just need to play this video on 2x and watch it, right? I always tell you, just play it on 2x and learn, okay? Now let's move on to the second part and the most important part from which you can get questions. And to be honest, you will tell me, ma'am, this is the most very dry part of it. So much I have to remember, ma'am. So much to, learn, right? So much is there. So how do we tackle the major crops that are there? So first and foremost, when we talk about major crops, one thing to understand is make a table. Okay, make a table and put it on your wall, right? Put it on your wall, put it on your bedroom door, put it somewhere, wherever you want it to be. And what you need to do is write these things. So the name of the crop, the kind of climatic. So again, so when you write climatic conditions, you can write temperature, then you can write rainfall, right? And then of course you can write about areas found, okay? And if you want to add, you can add some extra pointers that might be there. You can just add it on that. And all you need to do is to make this table and fill it up one by one. And trust me, studying becomes very simple, okay? Now, normally in your exams, what they can ask you is, from major crops especially, they can ask you, write about one beverage crops, write the climatic conditions, and explain about where it is found growing. No, they can ask you one question like that, or they can ask you write about cereal crops, write about maybe some non-food crops that are there. So they can ask you these kind of questions, which is why make sure you have a comprehensive notes to study this, and it will become easy. So broadly again, when we talk about major crops, we see that we have food crops and non-food crops, right? And we have non-food crops, yes? So non-food crops are in this case cash crops, right? So this is something that you need to understand. So first up, let us look at food crops. Now in food crops also we see that there are food crops from which wherein we have grains, then we have non-grains also as well, right? Or other than grains, right? So in food crops, we have this kind of bifurcation, grains and other than grains, yes? So understand this, okay? Are we clear so far, everybody? Are we clear? I'm going to take a stop right now in case if any of you are struggling, so do let me know. Yes, exactly. Grains and leguminous crops are also there. But along with leguminous crops, you also have oil seed, which is why I put it as grains and non-grains, okay? Now, first up, let us look at the first food crop, which is rice, right? Now, rice, as we know, is the staple food of our country, right? So, it is the staple food in Asia as a matter of fact, no? And we see that India here is the second largest producer of rice in the world. Can you tell me which is the largest producer of rice? Can you all tell me which is the largest producer? Which is the largest producer of rice? Can you tell me? Very good, Pramila, very good. It is China, right? China is the largest producer. And Nirmal, I think for political parties, the video is already there in our channel. Tarana ma'am has taken the video. You can check it out. And notes of this chapter will be available to you on our Telegram channel. Yes, link is there in the description box. Very good. All right. So now, of course, as you know, rice is the largest, India is the second largest producer, and we see that rice, as we know, is a kharif crop, right? So we see that it is a kharif crop, which means that it requires high temperature, which is about, 25 degrees Celsius, and it also requires high humidity, right? And we see here that it requires a rainfall which is above 100 centimeters. They grow in alluvial clayey soil. That means that the kind of soil that they require is a little more sticky, which will have high water retention, right? And we see that mainly it is grown in the north and northeastern plains, in the coastal regions and in the deltaic regions. So these are the major areas where rice is grown. While over time, in places like Haryana, Punjab, we also see that, what they have done is they have improved their irrigation facilities. So we see that some of the other regions that are there have become more adept in growing these growing rice, which is why they are minor areas where they are grown, right? ओके बिहारी मीना, मेरा क्लियर नहीं हुआ, क्या क्लियर नहीं हुआ, आप प्लीज बता दीजिए, मैं एक और बार मैं ये समझाऊंगी, कोई नहीं. Medicinal crops can most likely be considered as non-food crops. Okay, so we'll consider it like that. Yes, Nirmal, I hope I have answered your question. Yes, please, everybody, are we clear with this? I'm going to take my time with rice and wheat because chances of you getting this are higher. Okay? Yes. लैंग्वेज मैं एक और बार हिंदी में बताऊंगी, बट अगेन मैं एक और बार बताती हूँ, मैं प्राइमरीली इंग्लिश में पढ़ाऊंगी क्योंकि आप एग्जाम में इंग्लिश में लिखना है, राइट? ओके, कोई नहीं, एक और बार मैं बताऊंगी. फूड क्रॉप्स जो होते हैं, मेनली मेजर क्रॉप्स, फूड क्रॉप्स और नॉन फूड क्रॉप्स होता है, राइट? नॉन फूड क्रॉप्स में मेनली कैश क्रॉप्स होते हैं, मेडिसिनल क्रॉप्स होते हैं, राइट? और ये फूड क्रॉप्स में मेनली हम ग्रेन्स और अदर देन ग्रेन्स जैसे क्रॉप्स को हम मिलते हैं, राइट? नाउ ये ग्रेन्स में फर्स्ट थिंग वी विल स्टडी अबाउट इज राइस. तो हमारा कंट्री जो है, इंडिया वर्ल्ड में सेकंड लार्जेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ राइस है, और अभी हमने पढ़ा है कि राइस एक खैरिफ क्रॉप है, राइट? विच मीन्स दैट टेम्परेचर थोड़ा ज्यादा है, अराउंड 25 डिग्री से ज्यादा टेम्परेचर चाहिए राइस को ग्रो करने के लिए, और ज्यादा ह्यूमिडिटी भी चाहिए. जब रेनफॉल की बात करते हैं, 100 सेंटीमीटर के ज्यादा रेनफॉल चाहिए, और एलुवियल क्लेई सॉइल में ये ग्रो करता है क्योंकि ये वाटर रिटेन होना है. क्लेई सॉइल में वाटर रिटेन होता है ना, इसीलिए क्लेई सॉइल आइडियल है इसको ग्रो करने के लिए. और इंडिया में मेनली नॉर्थ रीजन में, नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न रीजन, कोस्टल रीजन में सब ये ग्रो करता है, राइट? और माइनर रीजन स्पेशली जैसे हरियाणा साइड में सब राइस का कल्टीवेशन होता है विद इरिगेशन, राइट? तो इरिगेशन सिस्टम्स होते हैं ताकि वो राइस ग्रो कर सकता है, तो वो माइनर रीजन्स होता है, ठीक है? तो आर वी क्लियर नाउ फॉर दोज ऑफ यू हु आर स्टिल कंफ्यूज्ड? यस, वेरी गुड. इरिगेशन ऑफ कैनाल्स एंड ट्यूब वेल्स, राइट? Now here, especially here, you need to focus on your map, right? So when we talk about your map, you know that there are major areas and minor areas. Now understand, remember I told you, northeastern, coastal side. So that is what is marked in your map here. Northeastern side, your coastal side is marked, right? So this is again going to be important to understand, okay? So the major regions are marked dark in color. Minor regions are again marked in lighter color. And very important to understand, right, is that mainly with this, it will come for identification. They'll ask you, we have given you the distribution of a certain crop. Identify it and write about it, okay? So if they ask you to do it, then you will have to remember. Any trick? Remember that if the eastern part of it is highlighted, right? When you look at the, wheat ka map, you will understand the difference. If the eastern part is highlighted and the coastal regions are highlighted, then you know that it is about rice, okay? Because the coastal regions are where they grow, right? So that's important to understand. Now you will understand when I do wheat, you will see that it's very easy to remember now, okay? Yes, I will try to do a mix of Hindi and English, but because Hindi is not my, I'm not very comfortable with Hindi, which is why it takes me some time, okay? Alright, now moving on to wheat, right? Now when we talk about wheat, we know that wheat is again a very, very important crop. And major wheat producing states include Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Now here, as you know, we do not observe no coastal regions, right? So we see that there are no coastal regions mentioned here. This is your main point of difference. Yes? Now for wheat, again, it being a rabi crop, it requires a cool temperature to grow and it requires bright sunshine at the time of ripening, right? And relatively, if you see, rice needed more than 100 centimeters of rain, but here it requires only 50 to 75 centimeters. Very good. And they require well-drained loamy soil. And again, major areas where it is grown is in the Ganga Satluj plains and of course in the black soil region in the Deccan. So have a look at the map, right? So your major areas that are there. So I'm going to highlight in the map, right? So your major areas are in this part, the Ganga Satluj part, right? And we also see that surrounding it are your minor areas. And here if you look at the coast, it is not being highlighted. So now if you get something where coast is not highlighted, then you know it is a distribution of rice. But if you go back, I mean, it's a distribution of wheat. But if you go here and the coastal part is highlighted, then it is distribution of rice. So are we clear with these two, rice and wheat? Because it's also going to come for identification in map. Are we clear? Yes? Are we clear, everybody? I'm taking my time with this part because it's important that you understand, right? Especially on an exam front, you should know this. Okay, all right. Yes, hello Zara, hello, I remember you, you come to every class of mine, so hello and welcome. Yes, okay, we are good to go. Now let's move on to the next bit of it, right? Now moving on to millets. Now the rest of it is very simple, okay? Now all you need to do is to remember the major pointers that I have told you. So millets that are there include coarse grains which are rich in proteins, fiber, vitamins and minerals. They require about high to moderate temperature and between moderate to low rainfall. And here we see that, you know, it can grow relatively in less fertile soil, right? And we're mainly talking about jowar here. And when we talk about jowar, right, we know that this is the third most important food crop with respect to area and production, right? And we see that in the case of jowar, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh are the most leading producers that are there. So important to understand and remember. Yes? Okay. Now moving on to food crops. Again, moving on to millets, we have ragi, right? And ragi here is rich in nutrients such as iron and calcium. And here we see that they have a moderate temperature, a moderate rainfall, red, black, sandy and loamy soil. And we see that Karnataka, you know, Jharkhand and Himachal Pradesh are some of the important states which cultivate it, right? Ma'am, ये कैसे याद करना है? So like I told you in the beginning itself, when you are doing it, remember three states, okay? So try to club or try to find which are all the common states so that you know that, okay, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and, you know, Maharashtra. These three have these crops growing, right? So state-wise, you will be able to remember this. It's going to be very simple and easy to remember it state-wise, right? And of course, what I would tell you is you will be able to understand it by making the table that I had suggested. Oh, is it so, Ashwini? The date sheet has been released. Definitely our team will be looking into it, right? So our team will be looking into it and you will definitely get an update on it very soon. I have not checked it because I am still watching this. I'm doing the session, but don't worry. How to learn the place, like I told you, make a table, right? And then after that, try to, you know, mark down the common ones. And I will do tips and tricks on all of this later on, so don't worry, okay? Now let's move on to bajra, which is also known as pearl millet, which grows on high to moderate temperature, low rainfall, sandy soil and shallow black soil is needed, found in Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, okay? So why I am going through this part is when you get this, make the table and study, right? That will help you in studying, okay? Are we clear so far? Are we clear? Ma'am, please, you make the table. I want to make the table, but all my information is scattered across slides. So what I will do is maybe when I share the PDF with you, I'll have one slide where I have all the information written with you, okay? And in the PDF that you will get, you will have the table with you, yes? But in the meanwhile, I hope all of you have liked the video, right? I hope you are enjoying it and I hope that you're liking the video and you're hitting that subscribe button, because trust me, if you're going out of our way to help you out, then you please make sure that you do only this much for me, yes? Now let's move on to other food crops like maize, right? Now, so far we're still looking at grains, whether it's millets, whether it's rice, wheat, we are all using grains. Now, moving on to maize, we see that maize again is a kharif crop primarily, and we see that it grows at a temperature between 21 to 27 degrees Celsius and requires a moderate rainfall. Now, mainly it's grown as a kharif crops, but in places like Bihar, maize can also be grown as a rabi crop. That means between November to April time, it can be grown, right? Yes, very good, Kanishka, very, very good. Now this again requires old alluvial soil, and here we also see that it's grown in Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, right? Now here we see that for maize as well, we see that modern inputs like high yielding varieties, fertilizers, irrigation have all contributed to the increased production of maize. So when we are switching towards some commercial approaches like high yielding varieties and fertilizers, we are actually able to increase the production of maize as well. And now moving on to pulses. Now when we talk about pulses, we know that pulses are rich in proteins, right? They are rich sources of proteins, and India is the largest producer as well as consumer. That means we produce maximum amount of pulses and consume maximum amount of pulses, right? So can you tell me some examples of pulses very quickly in the chat? Can you state some examples of pulses very quickly, everybody? Yes, Kanishka, it is also known as leguminous crops, right? Yes. Very good, everybody. Very good. Very good. Beans, dal. Okay, peas. Yes, very good. And most often than not, they are all leguminous plants. Now, what can you tell me about leguminous plants very quickly? What do we mean by leguminous plants? Yes? What do we mean by leguminous plants? What is the reason behind it? Very good. Peas, yes. These are all some examples that are there. Very good. So leguminous plants are those which have legumes, okay? No, they have legumes. So the fruit that is there is what we call as a legume, Vanishka, right? Vanshika, sorry. And we know that they have root nodules. In their root nodules, they have some bacteria that can fix nitrogen. Very good. So these fix nitrogen. That means that if they grow in relatively light soil or relatively less fertile soil, they will still be able to thrive because they have the ability to do nitrogen fixation, right? Very good. Now we see that they require a moderate temperature to grow and relatively less moisture, and we see that they are primarily found growing in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka, right? Now let's move on to understanding about food crops other than grains. So far what we saw, we are using the seeds. They are the grains that are there, right? But other than grains, we have sugarcane. Now normally if you see, sugarcane is cultivated to obtain sugar, right? And we know that sugar is extremely important to make sweets, to add it in our milk drinks that are there. So it's very, very important, and it's a rich source of carbohydrate as well. But now we also see that we get gur and we get molasses as well, right? Now we see that they grow in tropical and subtropical parts, and they grow in hot and humid climate with temperature of 21 to 27 degrees Celsius. Temperature is again between 75 to 100, and of course irrigation is required in places where there is not enough rainfall. Now India is the second largest producer of sugarcane. So India is the second largest producer of rice, and it is also the second largest producer of sugarcane. And Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, they are all examples of the same, right? So important to remember why we grow it and what is the purpose behind it. Now moving on to food crops, especially oil seeds, right? Now when we talk about oil seeds that are there, we see that oil seeds are mainly grown because from these seeds we get oil. So can you give me some examples of some, it's there on screen, but I want you to tell me, right? Yes, okay. Okay. All right, Virat, I understand that you're not able to follow what I'm teaching probably, right? So if you are struggling with some concept, if you're not able to understand something, you need to tell me, right? You need to tell me that ma'am ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, आप हिंदी में एक बार बता दो ताकि मैं हिंदी में आपको explain कर सकती हूँ, right? Yes, okay. For those of you who are getting distracted in the chat, you will be blocked because now our moderator has become super strict, so please be careful, right? Very good. Sunflower, coconut, they are all examples of the same, and groundnuts as well, right? Okay. Now moving on, we have different oil seeds which are grown in different parts of the world, and approximately 12% of the total area in India, right? And we see that different oil seeds can be grown, and some of them can be grown in Kharif season, some are grown in Rabi season, and some are grown in both seasons, right? So when we talk about groundnut, we know groundnut is a Kharif crop, and we know that they are grown in a large scale, and they majorly produce, they are one of the major oil seeds cultivated, right? Gujarat being the largest producer. Now on the other hand, when we talk about mustard, mustard is a Rabi crop, and sesame seed that is there is a Kharif crop in the north, and it is a Rabi crop in the south. And castor seeds again are grown both as Kharif and Rabi. That means they're grown both in Kharif and Rabi seasons. Yes? So on the other hand, what you need to remember here is very, very simple. Why are oil seeds grown? Some examples and some seasons. Okay, that is all you need to know. Alright, very simple and easy. Now moving on to beverage crops, and remember beverage crops because your tea and coffee that are there are also plantations, right? So on that front also you need to understand this. Yes? Okay. Now before I move to plantation crops, any doubts so far? Any doubts that are there so far? Yes? Any of you having any doubts? Virat, if you have any doubts, you can please ask me, okay? No, ma'am, everything is clear. See, if some of you would have not understood, right? If you have not understood something at one go, you can just go back and watch that part, or you can ask me as well. So don't worry about it, right? Yes, very good, Epic, very good. No, ma'am, not me. All right. Hello, Daksh, hello. Okay, we are clear. I'm not getting any more doubts. I think we can move ahead to beverage crops, right? All right. Now let's move on to beverage crops, okay? And I'm going to be a little fast with this because it's also very simple and easy. It's not very tough, right? Now, beverage crops, as we know, they are called as beverage crops because mainly we see that we get beverages, or we grow them for beverages, right? So in this case, if you see here in the case of tea and coffee, they're consumed as beverages, something that we drink, right? Now in the case of tea, to grow it at a large scale, it is a plantation and it is a commercial crop. So to grow it as a large scale, we see that warm and moist and frost-free climate is required, and they grow pretty well in tropical and subtropical regions, right? That means in that pretty hot and relatively less cooler temperatures they are able to grow. Now we see that for the growth of leaves, right? Because tea mainly is cultivated for the tea leaves. Yes, we see that frequent showers, that means frequent rain showers are needed, and they need to be distributed evenly. It is not that, it suddenly rains and then for some, few months it doesn't rain altogether. They require a kind of irrigation wherein there are frequent showers that ensures the continuous growth of leaves, right? And normally if you see, right, we see that there are hill slopes, they're found growing on hill slopes, and they require fertile and well-drained soil. Right? And Assam, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Kerala are all extensive, producers of tea. Ma'am, are there any beverage crops? Any other beverage crops? You have cocoa, right? Cocoa is also another example of a beverage crop because, you use like chocolate powder that you get, right? Okay. Yes, please ask me about your pre-boards, not a problem, right? Okay. So this is all about beverage crops. Now one thing you need to remember about tea especially, we also know that this is very labor intensive, right? So this is a labor intensive industry, and it also requires a lot of skilled laborers. So especially in collection of tea leaves, and after that, drying of tea leaves, and then later on, the powdering and curing, there are a lot of processes involved here. So in this case also, if you see, it is important to understand that tea requires high skilled laborers. Virat, if you're not able to follow some of the sessions, you can, maybe if you're not able to follow, you can go back and watch it on speed, or else you can come back a little more prepared and I'll definitely help you out. Okay? Yes. Now let's move on to coffee, right? So when we talk about coffee, we know that coffee especially, right? India is known for coffee, right? Now initially coffee was not grown here, but rather it was brought in from Yemen, right? So we see that the Arabica variety especially, because of which India is so well known, right? We see that the Arabica variety that is there, we see that it was brought in from Yemen. And we see that its initial cultivation was introduced in the Baba Budan hills, right? Now this requires a warm climate and moderate rainfall, and it is found growing in the hilly slopes, and of course requires fertile lands to grow. Yes? And we see that it is mainly grown in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Okay? Yes, ma'am, Kharif और Rabi crop में difference कैसा याद करे? So simple, Kharif means monsoon crops. Monsoon means monsoon season में ये grow करता है, और monsoon season में हम seed sow करते हैं, right? Rabi crops, winter crops. That means winter season में हम seeds sow करते हैं, ठीक है? Very simple and easy. Yes, ma'am, sugarcane is a beverage crop? No, it is not a beverage crop. It is not. Very good. Sugarcane is plantation. Yes, sugarcane is grown very extensively. Yes. Any doubt? Some of you are asking me to explain a part in Hindi. Is there any part that you want me to explain in Hindi? So far, anything that you need a re-explanation, or shall we move ahead to horticulture crops and move on to, your non-food crops that are there? Are we clear? All part in Hindi to बहुत tough होगा, right? Okay. So very quickly I'll do coffee once again in Hindi. So coffee जो है, coffee एक beverage crop है, और especially ये Arabica crop जो है, और Arabica variety जो है वो येमेन से आया है, राइट? और जो कल्टीवेशन है वो फर्स्ट बाबा बुडान हिल्स में इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ है. नाउ कॉफी ग्रो करने के लिए वार्म और वेट क्लाइमेट चाहिए, मॉडरेट रेनफॉल, हिल स्लोप्स, फर्टाइल रेड सैंडी सॉइल्स चाहिए, और स्पेशली कर्नाटका, तमिलनाडु, केरला, नीलगिरी रीजन में ये ग्रो करता है, राइट? वेरी सिंपल एंड इजी. Now moving on to horticulture crops. Now horticulture is a practice of growing fruits and vegetables for commercial use, right? And we know that fruits and vegetables again are very, very important. We have looked at grains, we have looked at, pulses, we have looked at sugarcane, we have looked at coffee, tea. Yes? So now it's important to understand about how fruits and vegetables are grown. Now to grow it at a large scale, we see that, there are certain fruits which are, require a certain climatic condition that can be grown in India using this horticulture practice, right? And we see that pea, cauliflower, onion are all some of the, vegetables that we produce in our country. And apart from that, if you see in your textbook, you have various examples of some fruits also, right? So we see that there are various fruits like mangoes, we have oranges, bananas, pineapples, right? So all of these examples are given to you in your textbook. Again, all you need to know is place, one place all you need to do is important, right? That means where do we find mangoes growing, or where are oranges found growing? So like Nagpur and the states, places you need to know. Very simple and easy. Yes? All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Yes? Now last part, we're going to look at non-food crops. We have rubber, cotton and jute. Now talking about rubber, we know it is an equatorial crop which is found growing in tropical and subtropical regions. They require a moist and humid climate and more than 200 centimeter rainfall, and we see that rubber is mainly cultivated for their latex, right? And we see that we use rubber for various purposes. We make a lot of things with rubber, rubber sheets, we use rubber as a stationery, and we use it for various other purposes as well, right? Which is why we see that it requires a temperature of over 25 degrees Celsius, mainly found growing in Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Andaman Nicobar regions. Now we'll go on to cotton. Now again, cotton is a kharif crop, right? We know cotton here is a kharif crop, and if we know cotton is kharif, it requires high temperature, it requires relatively light rainfall, and we see that they grow in black and alluvial soil, found growing in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and so on. Yes? And last but not the least, we have jute, which is known as golden fiber, and it is called so because of its appearance, right? We see that it has a bright, shiny, brown color, right? Which is why it is called as golden fiber. Again, it requires high temperature and humid climate, heavy rainfall, well-drained soil, found growing in these places. Yes? So with this, I have completed the major crops, and like I told you, with major crops, you need to know these few things, right? So in major crops and all the types of crops, what do you need to know? You need to know this. So what is the type of crop, right? What is the type of crop? You need to know what kind of temperature it will grow in, what kind of rainfall it would require, right? And where are the states wherein it is found growing. And if you have some additional remarks that you want to write about it. For example, the nutritional value, or in the case of, tea, you can write about how it is labor extensive. So you can write down these pointers as well, right? Telegram link कहाँ मिलेगा? Description box में आपको मिलेगा. Anybody has any doubts, or is there some part that you have not understood? मैम ये part मेरे को समझ में नहीं आया है, आप एक और बार explain कीजिए, तो मैं वो part आपको explain करूंगी, ठीक है? Any part that you have not understood yet? Very good, Kanishka, very good. Or are we clear with everything? You're like, ma'am, हाँ जो भी अभी समझ में आया सब कुछ, so I have nothing to worry about. Anybody has any issues so far? Please do let me know. Yes? This part is very simple. It's not very hard. You don't need to overcomplicate it, right? You don't need to think too much about it also. In a sense that you don't need to go too much in detail. Hello, Nitin. Hello. Okay then, I guess we can move on because most of you have told me that we are good to go, right? And if you are new to the channel like Aryansh, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and you make sure that you like this video, right? So here's a quick question for all of you. Which crop is more suitable to grow in a humid and tropical climate, right? Yes. Okay. Yes, Daksh, please ask me your questions, right? Please ask me your question. I will definitely answer. मैप भी आएगा इस चैप्टर में, आइडेंटिफिकेशन के लिए आएगा, इसीलिए जब मैंने राइस और व्हीट आपको पढ़ाया है, मैंने आपको पढ़ाया है कि कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करें कि ये डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ राइस है या डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ व्हीट. तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि आप इस चैप्टर से आइडेंटिफिकेशन के लिए पढ़ लो, राइट? इट्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. Very good, very good. This is a super easy question. You have nothing to worry about. The correct answer is option A, rice, right? So rice, of course, we know is a kharif crop which requires a humid and tropical climate to grow. Yes? So now let's move on to the last part of today's chapter, that is on agricultural reforms. Okay. Yes, Daksh, please ask me your question. I'll wait a minute for your question so you can ask me, right? Very quickly, you can tell me and we can get started. For those of you who still have doubts, see, I'm pausing here right now so that later on you shouldn't say, ma'am, aap chat nahi padhte ho, ma'am, aap mera doubts clear nahi karte. I always pause for your doubts, right? I always make sure I clarify your doubts. So that's very important that you understand that I'm here for you. So if there's anything, please do ask me. Yes? Okay. So let me just quickly refresh my chat. Okay, ma'am, sample paper. Yes, we're coming up with sample papers. So see, the main thing right now what we're doing is we're finishing off the syllabus. So in the channel, we are making sure that all of it is available for all of you, right? All the chapters, the one shots are available so that we can take up, we can take up your sample paper. So that is why we are now targeting wrapping up your syllabus. And by December, we will be wrapping it up very soon. Yes? No, I'm not. Why are you asking me that? What is horticulture? Horticulture is the science and the practice of growing fruits and vegetables, right? So we see that we grow fruits and vegetables at a large scale. We call this as horticulture. Okay? Ma'am, paddy and same thing. It's the same thing, Gayatri, right? Okay. So now I can see I waited quite a bit for some of the doubts to come in, but I can see that the doubts are not there, right? Is not. Arhar is a leguminous. Why is it not a leguminous crop? See, for any crop to not be, because at this point arhar is not popping up at the top of my mind as an example for leguminous crop, but if we say it is not leguminous, most often than not it's because of the fact that they would not have this pod like structure, right? It's not a legume, right? That is why we will not call any crop as a leguminous crop, provided if they lack the ability to fix nitrogen, then we will say it is not a leguminous crop, right? But I'm not sure of the Sanjana. We will just, I'll get back to you on this in the comment section, okay? So let's move on to agricultural reforms. Daksh, and when you ask me a doubt, I will explain it to you. Now, before I get into agricultural reforms, right, we understand one thing, that agriculture is extremely essential for producing a large variety of crops, right? And we know why we require each variety. Whether it is rice, wheat, or even as a matter of fact, something like rubber and cotton, it's very, very important to understand why we grow them. Because from rubber, of course, you get various, products such as rubber sheets and so on. From cotton, of course, you know that it is used in the textile industry. And here I'm talking about all the non-food crops, right? And in food crops, of course, we know that it is essential to feed the people that are there, right? While on this hand, when we see it has been practiced for over thousands of years. And we see that over time, over these thousands of years, what we observe is that agriculture is constantly being practiced, but we see that a lot of our country still depends on subsistence farming. That means take a small piece of land, sit and grow a lot of crops, right? We have not still progressed wherein we are able to convert large areas of land and implement modern tools and other, chemicals and all of it, right? So here we see that sustained uses of land without incorporating technological advances has affected our pace of agricultural development. So although us being an agricultural country, we see that we're still a little behind in the whole agricultural development, right? And we see that farmers are somewhere still dependent on monsoon, or they're dependent on the natural fertility of the soil to grow. And as a result, it is affecting their yield, right? Which is why over time the government realized that, hey, it is high time for us to start looking into all of these things, and they came up with these agricultural reforms. Now around 1960s and 1970s, they did come up with certain reforms, and this is when it paved way to the green revolution, it paved way to the white revolution, and at that point it seemed fine, like okay, we have suddenly improved the productivity, we have improved the production of whether it is crops or milk. But what eventually happened is that it did not help much, which is why better reforms were required, which was initiated between the 1980s and 1990s. So this is where your agricultural reforms comes into the picture. So agricultural reforms are those reforms which are brought by the government to develop the agriculture sector. So if they ask you, ये agricultural reforms क्या होता है? वो जो होते हैं, जो government implement करता है ताकि agriculture sector जो है वो improve हो सकता है, ठीक है? Yes, Kanishka, I will do that. What are fiber crops? Fiber crops are those crops which are cultivated for their fiber, like in the case of your jute, right? We use the fibers that are there, the jute fibers. Yes? Tectonic plates are the plates that we find at the base of the earth, right? Or we see that they are these earth plates that are there. So that's what we call as tectonic plates in very simple words, I would say. Now, of course, moving on to agricultural reforms, right? So let me finish agricultural reforms, Neetu, and I'll get to your question. Yes? So agricultural reforms that are there are of two kinds. We have technological reforms and we have institutional reforms. Now, these reforms or whatever agricultural reforms are there, it is to make sure that we make agriculture a profitable activity. That means if me as an individual does agriculture, I am able to make money out of it, right? I should get profit out of it. And if I make money out of it, my economic condition, my life will improve, right? So that is what we mean by the socio-economic condition. So what do we mean by technological reforms? Now, technological reforms, as the name suggests, is with reference to using advanced methods and modern equipment, right? So here we see that we use advanced methods and modern equipment in farming to increase the productivity, right? Yes, very good. The first 5 years plan came up with the reforms. So what kind of things can we use? We can use modern equipment, modern tools, practice irrigation, proper irrigation facilities, testing soil, training the farmers in understanding that is there, right? So we see that also using HYBs or hybrid seeds that are there are also very important to improve the quality. Using fertilizers that will improve the fertility of the soil, and constantly maintaining the guidelines, right? Making sure that we follow these practices are some example of agriculture technological reforms. Yes. Now we also see that another way is also for incorporating establishments like the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, the Veterinary Center, and for research and development. So what are we doing? We are improving the research aspect of it so that the sector improves, right? So this is important to understand. Now we also see here that it's also incorporating agricultural research institutes, horticulture development, and of course animal husbandry units that are there. Now, institutional reforms are one which would incorporate the technological reforms along with the institutions established, right? Yes, so technological reforms are like your green revolution where we have implemented all of these things, right? Having some modern equipment and of course incorporating irrigation, right? So what are institutional reforms? Wherein these are reforms related to land, credit, crop subsidies and selling of farm produced, right? So in the case, if you remember, a lot of you told me, ma'am, about the Kisan credit card that was there. Sorry. So we know that government subsidies that are there, the government of course is providing the farmers with some subsidies so that they can improve. It will improve their quality of life, right? And we also see that they discarded landlordism or the zamindari system, and of course abolished land consolidation and collectivization. That is, of course, collecting different pieces of land and asking them to grow as a single one, right? So they abolished all of this. And along with that, they also provided a Grameen Bank and provided them with a Kisan credit card, right? So they provided them with a Kisan credit card. Yes, and they also provided them crop insurance, which was called as the PIAS. So can you all tell me what is PIAS very quickly in the chat? What do we mean by it? So it is a kind of crop insurance scheme that was there for them, no? And this is very, very important to know. They will definitely ask you, what is PIAS? It's a scheme for them. Very quickly. Yes? Very good. Personal accident insurance scheme. So we see that it was a kind of insurance that was provided so that if at all any issues are there, they can implement it. These are small ways in which we would empower the farmer to remain in the agricultural sector so that, it's important that, so it's important that they are able to practice agriculture, so on and so forth. And they also avail a specialized kind of bank loans for them at a very low rate, right? At a very low interest rate. Now, apart from this, we also see that they provide with a minimum support price and they also provide with a minimum procurement price, right? So they also introduced, not minimum, they introduced certain procurement prices such that, the middleman or if anybody comes between the farmer and the seller, they still make good money out of it. It shouldn't be that they are selling, a bag of rice just for 10 rupees while the middleman or somebody else is selling it for 50, 60 rupees. countries, right? So it is important that they are able to get good money out of what they are selling. Now it's important to understand that is there because it's important to understand why these reforms were implemented. Now the reason being that again it is the main occupation in India, forming 17% of our total GDP. So here it's a very fancy economic term that we are going to use, that is the gross domestic product, right? So GDP is the gross domestic product. So what do we mean by this gross domestic product? Fancy definition is it is the total monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a country during a period of time, which is typically 1 year. Or simply put, GDP is the total goods or the total service and goods that we do or we provide in a given year or in a given period of time, right? So if the GDP is high, then it suggests that the country is in a good place, good economic condition. If the GDP is low, that means that the country is not at a good place or the economy is not proper. And what we observe with agricultural GDP is that it has been decreasing over a period of time. So from the 1950s all the way till 2010, 2019, there has been a considerable dip in the GDP. Now this is a serious problem, right? And this is important because they can ask you for a short answer question, right? So now this is very, very important. Now if there's a declining share in the case of the GDP in the agricultural sector, this in turn can affect others, right? So this can affect the other components of the economy. And we know that they have introduced agricultural research center, universities, breeding centers, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, we see that it needs to strengthen the agricultural sector. All of these things have been introduced to strengthen it, right? And if we don't strengthen the agricultural sector, then we know that in turn, the whole country's economy can get affected. Which is why we also see that there are various schemes under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan which facilitates this. Yes? Now, last part of this chapter is based on this in itself, right? So they can give you this table which is there on NCERT, which is a comparative study of the, GDP percentage, right? So here there's a comparative study of the growth rate with respect to agriculture, industry and services. And what we see is that although the overall GDP is set to increase, in agriculture alone we see that there has been a decline, right? Which is why we see that although overall GDP is increasing, it is not generating enough employment opportunities. Even though our GDP is increasing, we see that it is not giving us enough employment chances. And agriculture sector is declining, where farmers nobody wants to put money in the agriculture sector, nobody's providing them with the money, and if they're not getting money, they'll not be able to carry out farming. And if farming doesn't happen, we are not going to get food and other raw materials. And if that takes a turn, it could be really problematic, right? Which is why it is important to understand the contribution of agriculture in the Indian economy. It's very, very important to understand. So with this, of course, if you see, I have wound up the chapter, right? So the whole chapter, we've done it in 1 hour and 40 minutes. So I know that I was getting a lot of questions and some of you must be thinking, "Arey ma'am, aapne to mera question answer hi nahi kiya." वो ऐसा बात नहीं है. So some of you are asking me, "Ma'am, ये fiber crops क्या होते हैं?" Fiber crops वो crops होते हैं जिनके fiber के लिए. तो अगर जूट का एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं, जूट का स्टेम जो होता है उनसे फाइबरस पार्ट, राइट, द फाइबर लाइक लॉन्ग थ्रेड लाइक पार्ट होता है, उसको लेके हम जूट बनाते हैं. इन सच क्रॉप्स को हम फाइबर कहते हैं, राइट. It is a type. Again, hemp is something that we use where we use the fibers, right? You have hemp bags that are there, some seeds are there, right? So that is what we mean by it. It's just a type of fiber crop which we use for its fiber. Yes? Are we clear, or do we have any doubts, or are we all happy that we are done with agriculture? Now, do we find this chapter very easy? Are we finding this chapter easy, or are you like, ma'am, what is this? I don't understand anything anymore. Are we clear, everyone? Did we understand the last part? Yes? Have we understood the last part? Okay. Yes, all right. We have covered this chapter and this chapter is done. All done. So as you know, we mainly covered types of farming wherein we looked at subsistence farming and we looked at commercial farming, right? So subsistence is when we use a small piece of land or a small plot of land wherein we practice farming, and it's mainly for a personal use, right? While on the other hand, in subsistence farming itself, you have primitive and you have intensive. Now primitive is your slash and burn, wherein you know that a piece of land is identified, it is burnt, and of course the ashes are used as nutrients and it is grown. While in intensive, a small plot of land is intensively cultivated for high produce. Commercial farming is again when you use large areas of land, it is labor intensive, you tend to use a lot of agricultural implements, chemical fertilizers, so on and so forth, right? Then of course we looked at major crops where we looked at food crops such as rice, we looked at wheat, we looked at maize, we also looked at millets, especially jowar, ragi and bajra. Then we went on to looking at we also went on to looking more about sugarcane and pulses as well. Then we went on to looking at some non-grain crops that are there, right, such as sugarcane and oilseed crops. Then we went on to looking at non-food crops like rubber, cotton and jute. Yes? And on the other hand, we also looked at agricultural reforms, wherein we looked at the need for agricultural reforms. We looked at our technological reforms, wherein technological implements like modern tools, irrigation, setting up facilities for soil testing and making sure improved soil variety can be there by using fertilizers, and institutional reforms wherein certain practices such as abolishing zamindari system, abolishing collectivization, implementing certain specialized schemes for the farmers so that they are able to practice agriculture at a better place, right? And more important than that, it's important to understand why these agricultural reforms are there, because over time, although India's GDP is growing, at the agricultural sector especially, it is declining, right? There's a lack of public investment. We also see that the profitability is becoming less, which is a concerning thing, because at the end of the day, we know that if agriculture is not practiced, it can affect the other economies, right? So I hope now we are clear. Now I know I promised once in Hindi, so I will definitely do it. I will do it once in Hindi as well, right? So इस चैप्टर में हम एग्रीकल्चर के बारे में पढ़े हैं, राइट? तो फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट हमने पढ़ा है कि एग्रीकल्चर क्या है, राइट? और उसमें टाइप्स ऑफ फार्मिंग के बारे में हमने फर्स्ट पढ़ा है. तो ब्रॉडली 2 टाइप्स ऑफ फार्मिंग होता है, जैसे सब्सिस्टेंस फार्मिंग और कमर्शियल फार्मिंग. सब्सिस्टेंस फार्मिंग वो होता है जो एक स्मॉल पीस ऑफ लैंड में हम फार्मिंग करते हैं, वो प्रिमिटिव होता है और इंटेंसिव होता है, राइट? प्रिमिटिव में स्लैश एंड बर्न की एक तरह का प्रिमिटिव सब्सिस्टेंस फार्मिंग होता है. इंटेंसिव में एक छोटे पीस ऑफ लैंड में मैक्सिमम आउटपुट ऑब्टेन करने के लिए प्रैक्टिसेस होते हैं. प्रिमिटिव में केमिकल्स यूज नहीं होता है. इंटेंसिव में हम केमिकल्स का इस्तेमाल करते हैं. नाउ कमर्शियल फार्मिंग वो तरह की फार्मिंग होता है जो लार्ज एरिया में हम प्रैक्टिस करते हैं. प्लांटेशन एक एग्जांपल होता है. प्लांटेशन ऑफ टी एंड कॉफी एग्जांपल होता है कमर्शियल फार्मिंग के लिए. उसके बाद हमने मेजर क्रॉप्स के बारे में पढ़ा है, जिसमें हमने मेनली उनके क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस सच एज टेम्परेचर, रेनफॉल और जहां जहां हम उनको ग्रो कर सकते हैं, राइट? जिन स्टेट्स में हम ग्रो कर सकते हैं. तो मेजर क्रॉप्स में फूड क्रॉप्स के बारे में हमने पढ़ा है, जैसे राइस, व्हीट, मिलेट्स. उसके बाद हमने we also learned, I get stuck here for some reason, and then we also learned about pulses, right? और उसके बाद हमने sugar cane और oil seed crops के बारे में पढ़ा है. कैश क्रॉप्स या नॉन फूड क्रॉप्स हमने रबर, हमने कॉटन और जूट के बारे में भी पढ़ा है. और उसके बाद बेवरेज क्रॉप्स भी हमने पढ़ा है, जैसे टी और कॉफी. उसके बाद हमने एग्रीकल्चरल रिफॉर्म्स के बारे में पढ़ा है, क्योंकि एग्रीकल्चर जो है मोर देन 60% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन प्रैक्टिस करता है. इसीलिए गवर्नमेंट ने डिसाइड कर किया है कि सर्टेन एग्रीकल्चरल रिफॉर्म्स चाहिए ही चाहिए. इसीलिए टेक्नोलॉजिकल रिफॉर्म्स होता है और इंस्टीट्यूशनल रिफॉर्म्स. और क्यों हम इसके बारे में पढ़ते हैं? ताकि हमको समझ में आए कि एग्रीकल्चर का कंट्रीब्यूशन इंडियन इकोनॉमी में बहुत ज्यादा है, और अगर हमने इसके बारे में कुछ नहीं किया तो बाकी सेक्टर्स अफेक्ट हो जाएगा, क्योंकि एग्रीकल्चर से ही हमारा रॉ मटेरियल्स बिल्ड होता है. इसीलिए हम इसको पढ़ना बहुत बहुत जरूरी है. So with this, of course, Thank you so much. We are winding up today's class and I hope that all of you enjoyed today's class because I know today's class went a little long. We had to learn quite a bit, right? And here's a quick reminder for all of you on spoken English classes. If you know anybody who's in 9th grade or 8th grade, please make sure that you let them know about these spoken English classes which are taught by Cambridge certified teachers. It is a paid program, but I hope it definitely helps you, right? And you know that we've got you covered no matter what. So if you like this video, please hit that like button, share this with your friends and stay subscribed to our channel. If you have any doubts pertaining to the chapter, do let me know in the comment section below. Hoping to see you all very soon again. Bye bye and have a nice day.